Hi, here we go again. The last time we left you, we left on November 8th, 1915. And we had just mentioned that some of the fellows had gone to Drummond Island to hunt. Now, here's another factor that comes in regard to the hunting. Some of the fellows didn't hunt at Drummond Island. Some of the hunted in the southern part of Hillman Township and or Montmorency Township in what they call the Turtle Lakes area. Aye. And now, speaking about Turtle Lake area, that was an area that had been cut over, and of course, in order to get deer to come in, you had to cut off the high timber so that the new grasses, new shrubs would come up to have deer something to feed on. But it says here that on the 8th of November, it says Osgood went hunting to Turtle Lake. And Alma had the sewing club over. And then it says there on November 9th, there was a bank meeting. And nothing much happened on November 10th, 11th, or 12th. And then it says on November 15th, it says Dr. Grossman over for supper. And also the Schmeckels, the Bertrams, and we had a card party. And then on the November 15th, Alma had the sewing club. And on November 16th, a little snow, and dug up a few parsnips out of the garden. And then it said November 17th, as Osgood came back with the deer from Turtle Lake. And then Gus and Martha came in for a visit. The 18th, Harry was lame. Spitzer game at Polk's. And we had a venison supper also. And Dora and Grandma came down. And then on the November 19th, it said there was raining. There was a dance at the rink. Had a fine time and went to Schmeckels for lunch. On the 20th, it said there was a snowstorm, but he said I got a goose from McCutcheon. I don't know just what Mutcheon that was, probably Fred. Then it says on November 21st, it says Sunday, went hunting rabbits with Fritz Nagel and R. Schultz. I shot 3, and we got 8 all told. Elma and Dora went to church. The boys, I stayed home with the boys. Then on the 22nd, it says Grandpa came down and stayed overnight. And it says Elma and Dora went to Bittner's for a sewing club. And then on the 23rd, it says that Helen Gusty and Fred Zimmerman and Andrew Bujick came down. Also, Emma Grambua came over, and all for dinner, and went to a show in the evening. 24th, there was a Spitzer game at Bertram's, and then on the 25th, it says Mother rode out with the Detloffs. And on the 6th, November 26th, the Schmeckels had their 13th wedding anniversary, had a good time. 27th, Otto and Eddie came down and stayed overnight. And then on November 29th, a genuine snowstorm, it says here. The 30th, a fair day, the boys sliding downhill. And on December 1st, it says there was a Spitzer game at Bittner's. And then on December 2nd, there was a wedding. Helen Hardy's and John Bray went to the wedding with the Schmeckels. Had a fine time. On December 3rd, there was a Bund meeting. December 5th, Herman's birthday. The minister came over for supper, and also the Bertrams. And December 6th, the sewing club. Elma had the sewing club. Schmeckel, Bertrams, Kunertz, and played Spitzer. December 7th, a nice morning, red, very red in the morning, and it's commencing to snow. Grandpa and Grandma were down. And it says here, Gust brought a rooster. I don't know about a chicken from Betts. December 8th, the mild morning, thawing. Spitzer at Polk's. John Brady and Helen came down. December 9th, Cleve, Bruder over to practice choir. I remember her mother played the organ for choir practice. We had an organ in the house. Her mother had an organ. And it said Mr. and Mrs. Hine came for dinner. And then it's on December 10th, Alma went to the dentist. The boys were over to Detlof's. And then from there they went to the church reciting their pieces for the Christmas program. Now, on December 11th, in the evening, went over to the powerhouse. That would have been for what he doesn't say, he just went over there. Then it says here, Pa and Ma and Aunt Lawrence came down and brought a pig for us. Now, Aunt Lawrence was one of the relatives of the Drambergs, lived in Detroit, and I don't know just what the relationship is, but it all comes in through great-great-grandmother Patke. She had a lot of relatives, and one of them was the Lawrence family in Detroit as well as in Toledo. On December 12th, Sunday, choir practice. The boys practiced their pieces again at the church. 13th, sewing club at Bertram's. They had supper there. December 14th, a big snowstorm. And it says here, Mrs. Detloff came over to help Alma make sausage. December 15th, Harry's birthday. And then took the sausage to Nagel's to smoke in their smokehouse. It doesn't enter anything here for December 16th and 17th. But it says here on December 18th, Grandpa Shute died in Metz. Now, Grandpa Shute would have been the father of Amelia. The Shute family lived there in Metz, right across from what we now know as the Schrader Cemetery. And that little house right across from the Schrader house there, now owned by the Kowalskis. And the way that came about is when the old folks got old, they needed somebody to take care of them. So there was a young couple that lived nearby, and they offered to turn the farm over to them in exchange for taking care of them. And that's what they did. And it worked out fine. They took care of the old Grandpa and Grandma Shute until they passed away, then they inherited the farm. And I think today it's still in the hands of some of the Kowalskis. Now, on December 19th, helped decorate the church Christmas tree. Now, that's what I told you about, was decorated with real candles. And then on December 20th, a beautiful morning. Scrambled eggs for breakfast. Then it says here, it was his birthday, apparently, and it says here, the Detlofs, the Schmeckels, the Bertrams, the Bruders, the Klees, Kunerts, and the Krauses, and Lida, Ida, and Adolf Bertram all came for a birthday party, Dad's birthday. What birthday was it? Well, I kind of figured that out. He was 36 years old. Yes, they had a good time. And it said on the 21st, it was a nice day, and they had an invitation to go to the Wenzels for Christmas. That would have been out of Wenzel, out the poor farm. Now it said on the 22nd, Grandpa Shot died, or Shute. Alma and I went out, and the boys stayed with the Detlofs. And they drove around by Hardeese's on the way back, because Grandpa Hardeese, that is the senior Hardeese, the fellow who brought him over from Germany, was very bad, very ill. And then on, it says here on December 23, went to church and trimmed the Christmas tree. Grandma and Mrs. Kowaleski came down. Now, Mrs. Kowaleski would have been Bertha, and she was a sister to Grandma Grambua. Yeah, she was Bertha Shute, really originally. And they trimmed the Christmas tree. Now, in December 24th, there was a church program in the evening. The bank was also open from 6 to 7. And then after church, they came over to our house. And 25th, to church in the morning. Home all day, played with the boys. Now, on December 26th, it says, I went to the Ernest Grambos in the morning and went out to Ada Wenzel's in the afternoon. And it says in the evening, Otto and Dora, and Grandma Gramberg, Albrecht Kowaleski, Teresa Hardeese, and also Eddie came. Now, I suppose that's about his Uncle Ed, because he was still on the farm. Now, on, I suppose they probably came just came for second Christmas tree, December 26th. And then on the 27th, it says the Kovalevskis came down again. I imagine that was Albrecht and Bertha. And along with Grandma Dramberg. And on the 28th, there was an indoor baseball game, I suppose at the rink. Mrs. Polk came over. Bertram was over for supper. And also received a card from Aunt Marie Zimmerman. That would be in Detroit. On the 29th, there was Spitzer at Bertram's. And there was a basketball game at the rink. A letter from Bertha and Louise. On the 30th, it said it was a beautiful morning. And it says here, Alma went home with Ed Hardy's. Now, Ed Hardy's would be Uncle, they're the family that lived right next door in the old Gramberg farm. The original Gramberg farm was inherited by Anne Gramberg, and sure she married Edith Hardy's. And there were some boys there that were all still at home. There was Ed, there was Adolf, and there was Henry. And of course, before that, there was Teresa and Louise were all there. Now, on December 31st, it said it was flowing all day, went to a fireman's dance at the rink. But now, New Year's Day, that would have been 1916. Wow. A long time ago. It said we received word that William Hardy Sr. died. He was the man I was telling you about. And then also on that day, on New Year's Day, it says Willie and Cassie came home. They had been in Detroit, or were in Detroit. And Eddie had stayed over New Year's Day and New Year's Eve, gone to a dance, and it said Eddie came back from the dance at Hawks early in the morning. And it said they drove Henry and Lena and Grandma and Grandpa back home. They probably come to stay for a while. Then they drove back to Roger City. And then on January 3rd, it says raining. Willie went back to Detroit. I don't know what Cassie did, but Willie went back to Detroit. And January 4th, it says here that Grandfather Hardy's was buried today. Drove out with the Schmeckles. All right, now we're at January 6th, 1916. It said it was a cold morning, about 6 above, and we had sauerkraut for dinner. And with chiropractor in the evening. On the 7th, it said that Reverend Ross came in by train this morning. Now, he was the man that was going to replace Druckenmiller as the minister at the St. John's Church. And then on the 8th, it said it was cold, very cold. And apparently on December 9th, must have been a Sunday, it says Reverend Druckenmiller gave his farewell sermon. And then it says Cleage, Grossman, Bruder, Mr. and Mrs. Haskey came over for supper. Well, they got together frequently. And the old directors were re-elected. On the 12th, it says Charlie Detloff cut his hand, and Bert and I went over to see him to play Spitzer. And Alma and the boys were at Bertram's. 14th of January, 0 this morning, it says. 15th, Saginaw basketball team was here, and we got beat. Well, on the Sunday, must have been, or I don't know, Sunday, I suppose, Reverend Ross gave a German service in the morning and an English service in the evening. He said it was 3 below. Then on the 17th, there was a sewing club at Schmeckles. Had supper there. And Osgood went to Detroit. The 18th was a very cold morning. The 19th was played Spitzer at Polk's. And on the 20th, the choir met at Reverend Ross's. So must have had an organ there so they could practice choir. The 21st, it was raining. 22nd, a warm day. The snow was leaving. Cold in the evening. Okay, now, it says here on, they say 24th, warm, 50 above. the sewing club at Bittner's, and Osgood went to Onaway. There are lots of the sewing club met very frequently. Warm on the 25th, 42 above. Snow nearly gone. Wagons were going. Wow. The 26th, there was a bank meeting. And I finished my book called The Spoilers. And then on the 27th, sleeted, skating all over. Spitzer at our place. And on the 28th, very slippery. Very slippery. Then on the 29th, a fair morning, slippery, no snow. And I'm reading Limberlost, Limberlost, very popular book in the early days. The January 30th, it says Alma at Bertram's. And the January 31, Alma had the club over. Now, I don't know what club that meant. I suppose probably the sewing club. On February 1, over to Ross's in the evening with the Bertrams. On February 2, the electricians were at work at the bank. I don't know what they were fixing there, but they were at work at the bank. February 3, to Cleves for supper. Spitzer at Bertram's. And it says here, Bittner got skunked, so they must have been playing Spitzer. Well, if you don't get any points in a game of Spitzer, the time somebody goes out, you're known as the skunk. All right. February 5, a little snow this morning, and the train was late getting into town. The basketball team went to Alpena, and Rogers City won. On February 6, one of the Cleves boys was baptized. Must have been on a Sunday, I don't know. February 6, 1916. I'll just have to think of that family. It must have been young Henry Cleves. He's about the only one that would be in that era where he'd be about 80 years old right at the present time. That'd be about right. February 7th, a snowstorm, a blizzard. The 8th, the bank meeting. February 9th, it says Grandpa down. That probably is Grandpa Gramberg because he came at least once a month to meetings of the poor board. And on the 10th, Spitzer at Bittner's. On February 11th, a fair day, cold in the evening. February 12th, Lincoln's birthday. Bank was closed. Went to Calcite with Bert. And then cleaned the basement. Sunday, went to church in the morning and afternoon both. Wow. And then on February 14th, Valentine's Day. The sewing club met at Bertram's. And the Republican club, I suppose he was a member of that, they met at the Kitchen House. Well, you know where the Kitchen House was. February 15th, a beautiful morning, 22 above. Osgood went to Onaway. 16th, thawing, a fine day. And then the February 18th, stormy and cold. Choir practice at Bertram's. Bowled again. Bowled. Yeah, they had a little bowling alley in one of the buildings right downtown. It was a building that later became a pool room. It was a combination then of a pool room and a barber shop and a little bowling alley. You probably remember that. It was down there next to, where Leventhal had his store, in that area there. And on the 18th, very cloudy. It snowed hard a little while on the February 19th, and there was a basketball game, and Alma went to it. And on the 20th, it was 10 below at 6:30 in the morning. But the sun started to shine, and the sewing club met at our place. On the February 21, a fine day. The Republican Club had a caucus. 22, went to school with the boys. Dad used to go, remember? Washington's birthday or Lincoln's birthday, Dad always went to school, visited. Now, in those years, of course, he was also on the school board. Now, I had a nice day on the 23rd at choir practice at our house. February 14th, the ninth Sunday day, February 25 was very cold. And then it says here on the February 26th, Pa and Ma, that would have been his dad, Mother and Eddie were down. Very stormy. And then on Sunday, the choir sang, and he said he was sponsor for Harold Robert George Patzer. That would have been Bob and Helen Patzer's first child. Harold was the oldest in that family. I think there were about 7 kids there. I think there were 7 or 8. I think there were about 5 boys and 3 girls. Monday, the 28th of February, cold day, card party at Arscott's. And then on the 29th, the painters were working in the bank. And then it said March 2, Spitzer at our place, piled wood. And then on the 3rd, it said, beautiful morning, piled wood again. Here, the severe storm on March 4th in the evening. All of us went to church on March 5th. Alfred Rieger and his wife were over in the afternoon, and Schmeckels were also over in the evening. And then on March 6th, Dora came this morning, snowing and drifting hard. Herman went to school this morning. For March 7th, everybody's shoveling. Spitzer at Bertram's. And then March 8th, 10 above, blustering. And then on the 9th, snowstorm at night. Bert went to Battle Creek. There was a big sale at the Lindorf store. There was a birthday party on March 10th for Ruth Detloff. That was Charlie's oldest daughter. The 11th was a beautiful morning. And I went to church this morning. And Hassey's were over for supper. On March 13th, it was very cold in the morning and soft in the afternoon. There was a village election. And then there was a township caucus on the 14th. Osgood went to Onaway. March 15th, 4 above. Nice sunshiny day. March 16th, Alma's birthday. I got her an electric iron. You imagine that? Oh boy, oh boy. That was progress. And the Spitzer Club was over. 17th was a mild day. Alma went to the dentist. On the 18th, it says Grandma and Otta were down. Stormy in the forenoon. Dora went home. Alma went to the dentist again. And then on Sunday, it's the Ernest Grambua family and came over. We had choir practice in the evening. 20th, the sewing club at Schmeckels. 21st, storm, cloudy, or cold. Spitzer at Bittner's on the 23rd. Put wood in the basement. 24th, Laura was over for supper. I don't know where Bert was, but Laura was over for supper. And then March 25 was payday. I don't know, didn't say how much he got, but it was payday. Then on March 26, all went to church in the morning. Must have been Sunday. Soft snow. March 27th, raining hard. Streets flooded. Sewing club at Bertram's. 28th, Henry and Ma came down. Roads very soft. And then at 29th, it says Henry and Ma drove home, raining a little. I didn't know about Harry driving home, but nice and warm on the 30th. Streets nearly clear. Alma to a party at Hassey's. Alma got a package from Bertha. April 1st, raining hard. Now, let's see here. Then on the April 3, the sewing club at our place, Schmekel over for supper. Took a ride to Kelside. The 4th of April, a fine day. Boys outside playing. April 5th, Pa's birthday. Wanted to go home, but there was a snowstorm came up. April 6th, Spitzer at Cleese. April 7th, a real nice day. 8th, Eddie, Dora, and Otto came down. Stayed over to Sunday. Okay, then he said here on that Sunday, he said he commenced a job that he apparently got. He's a Sunday school teacher. Well, let's see here. What is this? April 10th. Letter from Louise and Bertha. April 12th, the bank examiners were here. And on the 13th, he dug out the hotbed. I suppose that's getting ready for another season. And then on the 13th, there was Spitzer at our place. Tank and Polk came over. And on the 15th, I had a bad cold, stayed home in the evening. And April 17th, sewing club at our Scots. Bert over. Then it said April 18th, Radke hauled manure. Spaded the garden. And they were painting the bedrooms downstairs, so we all slept upstairs for a week. Board of Supervisors met, and Grandpa was down on the 20th. A man by the name of George Benier was elected chairman of the Board of Supervisors. I think he was from the Ottawa area. Easter Sunday, to church in Metz. And then to Henry and Martha's place. And then back to Rogers by train later. And I'm by the name of John Mielke. He spaded the garden for us. April 28th, planted strawberries. April 29th, raked the garden. And April 30th, the Krauses were over for supper. May 1st, raining all day. Now here, May 2, two bunnies for the boys from the Krauses. I have a picture of that. It shows Herman and I and Mother standing alongside the house, and we have these two little bunnies, and I often wonder where they came from. Because then we had a hutch built out in the backyard, and we used to go and gather clover and other things to feed the rabbits. But those two rabbits evidently came from our town. May drizzling day. Choir practice on the 4th. Worked in the garden on the 5th. Saturday, to Cleese for supper. Litke and Hardy's was down. And 8th, planted potatoes and planted raspberries. Right here, Grandmother Paitke died. Remember I told you about that, going to that funeral. And then it says here that on May 12th, out to the funeral for great-great-grandmother Paitke at St. Peter's Church in Metz. Isn't that something? I told you about what happened there at that time. And then, on May 13th, it was a nice warm day. Fixed a place for the rabbits, a new place for the rabbits. Teresa and Albrecht Kowaleski came down. And now that would have been Teresa Hardy's and Albrecht Kowaleski. They apparently weren't married yet because it says Teresa H. and Albrecht Kowaleski. They were married later on. May 14th, Sunday, a cloudy day, and it rained a little. Now, That's the last entry in this diary, May 14th, 1916. Just watched the last part of the Rose Bowl game, and Ohio State beat Arizona State 20-17. That was a real humdinger of a game. Now, I still have a few things left here in this diary. The diary, official diary, of course, is all over. But there are a few little items in this book that I thought I would just mention. And there was a space in here where it says memoranda. And there are a few names listed here that you will recognize. And one of them says here, there are certain addresses listed in here. One of them says Joseph Johns, 164 Fairfield, Nebraska. Isn't that something? Fred Herzl's phone number in Toledo, B41X23. How's that? Now, there was a Bertha Wetzel that was living in Laramie, Wyoming. Now, she was related to great-grandmother Pateke's. And she was living at box 13, number 13, RFD, Laramie, Wyoming. Then there's an address here for Otto Erlup. Now, he was a fellow, as they became a Lutheran minister afterwards. But at this time, he was living at 620.5 Sheridan Avenue, Detroit. And then in here also, there's an address. These are Toledo addresses, and a Schreff. Now, the Schreffs were also related to the Drambergs. 631 East Erie Street, Toledo. Then there's Otto Kreft, 628 Curtis Avenue, and that's where I frequently stayed when I went down there. Then there was Albert Perlick. They were also relatives. Fred Herzl at 2040 Forest Avenue, Toledo. Now here's a couple other ones out of Detroit. It says Amel Broluska Dramberg. Now, one of Fred Dramberg's daughters was, Grandpa Dramberg's brother. He had, I think, one son and 3 daughters, and one of them married a Broluska. And he was a kind of a scientist and an inventor. I remember being over there one time at that house when I was in Detroit with either Grandpa Dramberg or Mother and Dad. And then there's also Ed Lawrence, 2268 Michigan Avenue, Detroit. Now, the Lawrences were also related to the Drambergs, and I think one time previously in there mentioned that Tanta, they call her Aunt Lawrence, was here to visit. Now, also at times it said Louise Dramberg was living at 567 Jefferson Avenue in Detroit. And here's one, George, you'll remember this, William C. Schultz, 832 Foxdale Avenue, Winnetka, Illinois. You were there, I remember that. And then there are a few other little items that are listed in here where he borrowed money apparently from Grandpa Dramberg or Grandpa Grambo, and he was paying it back so much a week, so much a month. Then there's also a note in here to the effect that he apparently had bought up some property on what they call tax sales, and he bought up 5 lots that were listed apparently in the Roger City area there where the taxes were delinquent. And it tells what he paid for them, paid the taxes on it. Now, if you bought a person's property on a tax sale, they had about 2-3 months afterwards where they could redeem it. Well, it says on here, in a note on the side, it says all redeemed. So he didn't make any money on that, but he did make money on the fact that they had to pay him a premium, so much, such as percent on the amount of money that he had spent. And then there are other few little items that are listed in here that are hard to tell just exactly what it meant. But this is a kind of an interesting little book, and isn't it interesting to go back over this after so many years? and see what happened. Now you notice all through this thing, the thing that I noticed so much is that these people in that period of time, that's 80 years ago, were very, very social. They met frequently. They ate at each other's houses. They visited constantly, but of course I suppose that was their entertainment. And it's a little bit different than the life we have today, where we get through with our meal, we turn on the TV, or we turn on the radio. Well, those people just get out and went over to visitors. They most of the time, of course, they walked. They didn't use their cars for everything. Cars were used primarily just for Sundays. But nevertheless, they frequently were out and around, visiting here, visiting there, taking the part. Very social people, the whole group at that time. Now, I might say that overplay that you've heard in the part of that tape, apparently I didn't know that this machine was picking up the TV game I was watching, the Rose Bowl. So you'll have to excuse that, but I didn't know that this darn tape was running at that time. Or apparently running, and I didn't pay any attention to it. Or it was running during a period of time when I wasn't watching it. I don't know what it is, but that's what it is. That's the Rose Bowl noise that you hear there in the background.